The National Academy of Sciences, Washington. Gathered here are young people who may be America's scientists of the future. They also represent a resource to the country which is fast disappearing. Creative young minds excited by science. These high school seniors are the winners of the Science Talent Search, sponsored by Westinghouse and Science Service since 1942. To enter, 1,000 teenagers from across the country write a major research paper on a topic in science or mathematics. Their projects range from hydrogen engines to chemical treatments for the diseases of silkworms.
Is the blood green inside of it?
Actually, it looks like it's a little blue, but actually the blood is yellowish.
Oh.
These are the actual pellets used to generate hydrogen, which when dropped in water produces hydrogen gas.
5 times the weight of water to equal a small weight of phase change material.
The top 40 finalists are invited here to Washington to exhibit their research and to be judged by a panel of scientists. 10 students will win major scholarships, but all 40 are considered winners. The culmination of their trip is a formal banquet at which the scholarships are announced. Most of Washington's scientific community turns out for the affair. A survey of past finalists reveals that 70% have gone on to get PhDs or MDs. 5 Nobel laureates are among the ranks of former Westinghouse winners. Leon Cooper, Physics, 1972. Ben Mottelson, Physics, 1975. Sheldon Glashow, Physics, 1979. Walter Gilbert, Chemistry, 1980. Roald Hoffman, Chemistry, 1981. A healthy nation needs new scientists. It also needs informed critics of science. The Westinghouse winners are the fortunate few who've had the best of science education. They're the rare exceptions in a population which understands very little science.
What the Westinghouse Science Winners shows is what we can do with the brightest and the best students, the ones who are really superbly equipped, come from their best location, have the best support and the best encouragement. We know how to educate them, but our problem is with all of the rest of the population that is likely to have no science at all, never even become eligible, never even think about this kind of a career. That's where the real problems lie.
The developing crisis in science education has serious implications for the nation's future. At a congressional hearing on funds for education, Sheldon Glashow.
Americans win the lion's share of Nobel Prizes in physics, chemistry, and medicine. And this is frequently but wrongly quoted as evidence for the health of American science. In fact, it is interest earned by past investments in science education and research. We have been leading our young people away from science and technology. The almost complete lack of pre-college teachers with competence in science and math has played a very important role.
There has been a sharp decline in the number of new science and mathematics teachers being trained. 43 states are reporting shortages. Due to low salaries, younger people are not going into the field.
Sometimes the criticism is also made that our science teachers are getting older and older and that they really haven't kept up with the new developments in science. That is true, but let me add that many of those teachers don't even know the old science, and that is worse.
Half of our teachers are on emergency certification, which means that they have probably not even taken a course in the subject of science and mathematics, which they are allowed to teach or have to teach. And we are therefore spinning into a kind of scientific illiteracy.
We have a public that reads astrology columns instead of learning about the important issues like nuclear safety and toxic waste and environment, energy trade-offs. We have decision makers who have never had any science and technology and are not equipped to weigh these kinds of issues. And we have a public that has practically no science background and is almost negligibly equipped to decide on who they should support.
The Science Talent Search winners are unusual in that they develop and cultivate a strong interest in science early on. Nearly all his life, Tim Tylaska, 18, of Mystic, Connecticut, has been trying to design himself a way to fly.
As long as I can remember, I've enjoyed all sorts of flying activities. I built a hang glider about 8 years ago. I built my first one, and I've worked up to bigger, better ones. I've tried parachuting and also, well, parasail, ascenting when I designed it. Also conventional airplanes I've flown. I don't like that as much as a regular hang glider where you're out in the open so much. The design of the hang glider was my own. I made small models of it first and came up with a design that looked the most practical to build, to fold up easy also. So I designed it, and it needed quite a few modifications to get it to fly straight. It still, you have to adjust it every time when there's a different wind direction.
Whew. All right, yes.
I like mostly the feeling of being able to get off the ground without the inside closure of an airplane. It's all out in the open, and it's really a lot of fun, I think.
Tim was always trying to build flying machines, and his first really successful one was a man-powered one that he built when he was in, I think, 6th grade, and he used my drapes for the wings and had every child in the neighborhood pushing his bicycle to get it going fast enough so he could take off. And I think from then he graduated into real flying lessons in the hang glider. He's always been building, tinkering, and planning to take off for the moon ever since he was about 3.
Over the years, Tim has built more than 100 different science projects.
This is a Tesla coil I built. It puts out high-frequency voltage. It wasn't that hard, really, to build. The hardest part was winding the coil. It has about 2,000 coils of wire on there. I'll turn out the light now so you can see what it does.
The Tesla coil puts out a charge which will excite the phosphor in fluorescent lamps simply held nearby.
Tim is totally involved in finding solutions or seeking answers to the questions he raises. Oftentimes you wonder if in that involvement with outside activities, in this sense from school, he might not find school getting a little bit in the way and slowing him down.
When I first built this go-kart, I used mothballs for the fuel. The mothballs are a stronger fuel than regular gasoline.
Tim is an expert welder. He taught himself in his basement on equipment provided by his father.
I'm a practicing engineer, and I've seen what works and what doesn't work. And I found out, so you're not a phony, you really have to have had hands-on experience. These boys have learned by building and finding out what works and doesn't work. I myself just sort of start them going and then get out of the way. I found out that's much better, and they go a lot farther than if I were ever there.
There's a real danger to the way Tim works. Tim is constantly doing projects that require volatile materials, possibly toxic types of materials from time to time, certainly explosive kinds of materials. I like to ask him on a regular basis after he's done something, did he count all his fingers and toes, or does he really have all his hands and feet?
About 4 years ago, I started filling balloons with hydrogen, and I had one. I wanted to see how much force it had when it exploded, so I took a candle and fastened it to the end of a stick and lit the balloon. It was such an explosion that it knocked me right down off my feet. And from then on, I decided hydrogen would be quite a powerful fuel to use.
Tim has experimented with several different fuels. He built a hydrogen engine. Then he adapted it to produce methanol.
I dug a pit here to do all the testing, and what I tried to do was convert an engine exhaust and heat into methanol fuel. The problem with generating the methanol is that you need a high temperature and pressure. Because of the high pressure, in case there's an explosion, I got in a titanium barrel there.
Some of the projects are dangerous, but on the other hand, each person has to challenge himself somehow, and better he should challenge himself against these science projects and the unknown than against, say, the law or some social thing.
Stuff that's really different is usually dangerous. If it wasn't different and not dangerous, then everybody would do it. I get a feeling of I've done something that no one else has done, maybe because other people have been afraid to, not because it couldn't be done before.
Some children are born with the urge to create and to work with ideas and to build things, but they're in a minority. Most kids need the support of their family and the support of good teachers, and in order to succeed and take the kind of risks and do the kinds of things that are needed to be successful in programs like the Westinghouse competition, those kids must have support, which is not now available.
Talent Search winner Jonathan Taylor, 17, of Bayside, New York, is a marathon runner.
I only decided last year that I wanted to run in a marathon, and it takes months of training, just like it takes months of investigation to even begin to understand the problem that you're working with.
This morning, Jonathan is running because he has 500 mouths to feed with mulberry leaves.
I think that the only attribute, and probably one of the most important attributes of scientific investigation, is probably perseverance and curiosity. Just doing the project itself was much more important than winning. I discovered that science wasn't just all studying and memorizing stuff. It was also it could be a lot of fun.
I made the stab yesterday. How does it look?
It looks okay.
All three of the Taylor children are attracted to biology. 15-year-old Dina is involved in a project on squid. John's older sister Naomi is a former Westinghouse winner who did research on leeches. It was Naomi who helped procure the silkworms for Jonathan.
I discovered a long time ago that my sister was very possessive. She took over the entire kitchen to do her biological research project with leeches. And I always was wondering what she was doing, and I was always very interested in what she was doing. And she used to feed her.
There were times when you helped me.
I know,
right?
That's true. That's right. She wanted me to let the leeches suck the blood out of me because she was getting a little anemic.
No. There was just times when the leeches needed to be fed, and sometimes I wasn't always around. And, if you need something, it has to be done. And who else should you ask but your own brother?
That's true, but there are limits to what a brother will do for a sister.
Nobody said we'd make a nickel, and we're making loads of money. We must have had 2,000.
Jonathan doesn't spend all his time doing science projects. He's also president of his senior class at Benjamin Cardozo High School.
I feel I don't miss out really on anything. I do the things I do because I really enjoy them.
Yes, it is. When is it due? It's going to be due probably Monday.
I play the violin, I play the viola, I'm involved in school musical productions, and basically I make time to do the things I like to do. I view myself as possibly a fledgling scientist, but right now I think I'm just a plain ordinary high school student.
Definitely. Where are we going to play? 46?
John's biology teacher strongly encourages the students to compete in science fairs. Morton Rogan.
Science fairs give the youngster an opportunity to show himself and gives him an opportunity to work towards something. It's very similar to a student who's in an orchestra. He rehearses and he practices all year long, and the spring concert gives him an opportunity to show what he's achieved. Science fair do something similar to that. He works toward a goal. You work with a dynamic, creative mind when you work with a kid, and when you can teach creatively, it's the most exciting thing in the world.
But teachers who feel this way are increasingly scarce.
It's not at all surprising that the number of science than math teachers is declining, and that approximately half of them who train for it never go into the field. Why would somebody want to be a science teacher in the first place? It's a generally demeaning occupation. It doesn't have a high income. It doesn't have a high status. One can make twice the salary by going into even the most beginning occupation.
You've heard it, teacher quality. I can tell you from my own experience and from the experiences of all my friends, it is the single most important factor in education.
Westinghouse finalist Rena Gordon testified about her education before a congressional subcommittee.
Mr. Mandry, a mathematics chairman at Midwood, made all the difference as far as I'm concerned. He backed me up 150% and showed me first off what fine quality teaching can be.
Matthew Mandry.
I've remained in teaching, I guess, for much the same reasons that I entered the field of teaching. I love my subject area. I also love my students. And it's my belief that the teacher and the classroom teacher has a tremendous impact upon an individual. Rena's an exceptional young lady, a tremendous energy, tremendous interest, and a true love of learning. My role in Rena's high school years was really as a guide to let her find out things about herself, a guide so that she could realize that some of the obstacles that she perceived were really temporary obstacles that could be removed by her own efforts.
Rena excels in math, but she also loves English.
Susan claimed that Jane reported that Mary cried for a reason.
Who did what she did for a reason?
In her research, Rena combined mathematics with linguistics. She created a model for how the brain, when confronted with an ambiguous sentence, chooses one particular interpretation.
Susan claimed that Jane reported that Mary cried for a reason. What do you say?
Mary cried for a reason.
Michael?
Susan claimed.
Lisa?
Mary cried for a reason.
Well, I disagree. I don't see how...
What I tried to do was to explain how we were interpreting a particular type of sentence in English. The sentence was ambiguous. In other words, there was more than one possible interpretation. And yet, in the course of an ordinary conversation, people didn't stop and say, how am I to interpret that sentence? They automatically resolved that ambiguity and understood what the speaker meant.
The daughter of two teachers, Rena comes from a family which places a high value on learning. She takes courses at Brooklyn College and has attended several summer programs. Her educational opportunities have been exceptional.
If you look at the Westinghouse competition, you probably will not see very many children from the blue-collar worker family or from the tenement or from the lower socioeconomic groups. This is, in my judgment, is a consequence of a couple factors. There are two kinds of poverty. One of them is economic, and the other is intellectual and cultural. Most of these families have both kinds of poverty, and they don't have the resources.
In the past, low-income students could attend National Science Foundation summer programs. These no longer exist. Funds for science education in the U.S. climbed to an all-time high after the Russians launched Sputnik in 1957. The race to the moon was on, and national pride was at stake. But after the competition was won, the country seemed to lose track of the need for encouraging youth in science. And in the post-Vietnam years, NSF funds for education fell sharply.
We are in a state of complete abandonment of the responsibility, from the point of view of the government, for the support of educational experiments, educational refurbishing. And I believe this has to do with very bad advice our president is just getting. His science advisor recently said that because the funds are so small and the performance is so poor, all support should be phased out.
Every year, New York City area schools produce about 1/3 of the Westinghouse winners. Most come from Bronx Science and Stuyvesant high schools.
I think what the Westinghouse science winners prove is that we do know a lot about how to educate. At least we know how to educate the elite. We know how to educate people who are going to be high-level scientists. And the Bronx High School of Science and Stuyvesant are examples of how far this can go, that one can end up with a half a dozen science winners in the Westinghouse group alone.
This year, Stuyvesant High School had 7 winners, more than the entire state of California. Elite in this case doesn't mean economically wealthy, but the students who attend here generally do come from families with a high respect for education. Stuyvesant is a public school which selects the city's top science and math students by examination. Richard Chang, 17, used to commute 3 hours a day to attend school here. Richard and Noam Elkes, 15, the top math student in the nation, are both Westinghouse finalists. Noam also won the composing competition of the Juilliard School of Music.
Well, one of the things that can be done with improvisation is you take somebody's name, you convert it into a series of notes. Each letter corresponds to a note by a certain code. That will make sure you know what the music will sound like in the beginning, and then you improvise something on that theme. So taking Richard's name, we have R is Re, I, the first I for 1, so that's the first note, which is C. C, of course, you know. H is German for B. A, of course, we know again. R is another Re, and D. So let's give it a nice rhythm. See what I can do with it.
Stuyvesant has a tradition of offering very special courses, such as this optics class, in which every student makes his or her own telescope. The course is taught by Ted Seiler, who at one time ran a foundry.
Stuyvesant High School is not a new school. It's good 75 years of age, but we have a wonderful faculty and a group of students that are hungry for knowledge.
A great deal of the work in the telescope class is grinding the mirror. It can be monotonous, but for me it is very relaxing. It provides a healthy balance to all the academic courses that I am taking. Mr. Seller is a very understanding teacher. There are many times when I had difficulties and he was very supportive.
With such a high-caliber student body comes strong academic pressure, making it difficult to find time for a Westinghouse project. Richard's research on silicon ribbons took 400 hours to complete and put him in danger of failing his regular courses.
At Stuyvesant, there are many competitive students. Since we are very highly motivated, I think some of the pressures exerted by the teachers are unnecessary. For me, it has been very upsetting at times when teachers don't really try to understand some of the problems that I have faced. I was very depressed many times. Nevertheless, I feel that since I have learned a great deal from my Westinghouse project, the whole experience is perhaps even more valuable than my schoolwork. I spend most of my afternoon and evenings doing my homework. Actually, all of it. I work very hard because I enjoy the pride and satisfaction of achieving a high goal. If I were given one wish, I would wish for more time, probably, because at this point right now, I am more or less trying to absorb the huge quantity of information that is given to me. And so right now, I like to be able to think about the concepts I've learned and see the relationships among the various concepts, and to just spend a little time thinking.
For a student already interested in science, New York City, with its libraries and universities, offers vast resources. But getting students interested in the first place is another matter.
I have a very deep concern that ultimately neglect of science education is going to affect the United States standard of living and its competitive position in the world. We already see that we are beginning to lose our steel industry. Other countries are able to compete with us in steel. We are beginning to see the time when other countries provide airplanes instead of us. We are buying our high-speed trains from Japan. Our electronics industry is gradually disappearing from this country, and we could very well find ourselves losing a generation of scientists and technologists and decision makers.
Statistics say that by 1990, there will be a 40% increase in jobs requiring technically skilled labor. Certain members of Congress are quite worried by the specter of mass scientific illiteracy.
And yet, we find that each of those programs has either been zeroed out for no action by this administration or all but eliminated in the area of research instrumentation. And science education programs have been totally eliminated. Now, how do you reconcile saying we should do these things and yet we're not going to do them?
Mr. Chairman, there are something on the order of 17,000 school districts in the United States. 24 programs spread over $60 million. You weren't doing anything other than band-aiding some problems.
Last year, we asked the National Science Foundation to put forward a national program that would not just be a Band-Aid, and yet there's absolutely no initiative in that agency to respond.
I understand now that a committee is about to start its deliberations.
NSF's policy board recently appointed a commission to study the pre-college science education problem. There have been studies upon studies of science education, but one thing seems certain. To get children interested in science requires good teaching. The question is, where will the teachers come from? Frank Pavia is chairman of the science department at Detroit's Renaissance High School, where one of his students is a Westinghouse finalist. He holds 2 master's degrees. To stay in teaching and support his family the way he wants to, he works 2 part-time jobs.
Now, you have been working for 2 months on separating mixtures. And this is the test to find out if you understand really how we separate mixtures in the scientific world.
The teaching of science, something that you love to do, and get paid to do that. It's probably the finest thing one can do. Is it supposed to do that? Did it?
Yeah.
Then it's supposed to. What does that tell you about it?
That it tells us that it's dissolved.
It's dissolved, and dissolved things go through the filter. So now you found out something about your substance. Now you're going to have to get that green away from whatever else is in there. Okay?
Oh,
you figure it out. It's up to you now. You have 7 days.
Okay?
Good. Our school business, our school teaching, in many ways is not work. It's really a labor of love.
$1. Thank you. Thank you.
And many teachers have part-time work, and we call it work because we only do that to help support ourselves. For example, in my work collecting toll during the summer, we do that. It's not distasteful.
$1. Thank you.
But it's disliked. The only reason it's done is to help yourself be comfortable. The place of a teacher in the summer really is in the classroom himself, upgrading his skills. And it's my opinion that every science teacher should be in classes during the summer, every summer.
Well, what do you think?
The basic reason that I have the students do a science project is for them to communicate with nature, to communicate with the outside world. We today read a lot of material, look at a lot of TV, and everything is right there, pat. We find out things, if we want to do something, we look at the library and you look it up. But who looked this up in the first place? How do we learn in the first place? We learn by doing operations on the outside world.
That's very, that's not being very fair.
What do you think?
Well, basically it would make sense, but to be totally sure
Why?
what we do. Solubility would change it.
Solubility would change the liquid.
Yeah.
Okay, you do what you think is right. This is a test.
One of Pavia's students, Janae Spears, did her Westinghouse research on solar energy.
What Janae has taught me is I will not be surprised at the heights to which our students can achieve. To see a person with that much fortitude and that much stick-to-itiveness is very impressive to me.
Well, I think science is important mainly because of the curiosity. I like to know why things happen. I don't like to just accept things because someone else tells me they're true. I like to actually learn for myself why things work or why certain concepts are facts. I may get some comments about, oh, you're a genius, you're a brain, or something like that, but I don't see myself as that at all. The only difference that I see between me and another student is that I may work a little harder, I may study a little more, but my main reason for doing that is because I set goals for myself early, and I realize that there are certain things that I have to do in order to reach these goals, and I can only reach them through hard work. I used to feel that I was kind of lacking in some of the social activities, but recently I've been involved in so many things that I really couldn't do anything else. And I think that if I wasn't away during the summer at a university working on a project, then I'd just be bored at home.
What Steve was telling me.
My grandmother made my dress.
Your grandmother made your dress?
They pass it down.
I want a
Is it late?
Janae's research grew out of a visit she and her family made to a model solar home. She noticed a large water storage tank in the basement and thought there must be a better way to store the energy.
What kind of material is this surrounding the tank?
This is 6 inches of insulation around the tank, but it's necessary for this type of a system
Right, for
to
insulating.
keep the heat in. Tell me more about your project. You had a way of making this smaller.
Right, using phase change materials. Now, the compound that I use is hexafluorosilicate hexahydrate, which is a salt hydrate. And what you would do is actually place containers of these salt hydrates inside the water, inside the storage tank. And because they're phase change materials, when they store the heat from the sun, they in turn release it to the surrounding water, and you can save a lot of space. What the engineers are lacking is the human need. And if you don't have the human need, if you're not meeting the human need, then I don't think technology is really where it should be.
Next year, Janae will leave Detroit to attend MIT in Cambridge, Massachusetts.
I do expect to run into some discrimination. I've led pretty much a sheltered life as far as that's concerned because I've always been in predominantly black schools. And I've been thinking about how I would react to that, and I'm really not sure. I'm hoping that I won't take it very negatively because if I just keep my priorities in order and realize and pray for those people who discriminate against me, as long as I keep my priorities and understand where I'm coming from, then I don't think that it will be too bad. One thing that's very important to me is the religious aspect of my life, because I think that the Lord has helped me to do a lot of things that I've accomplished thus far. And the first thing that I want to do once I get to Massachusetts is to join a church, because that helps me when, say, finals are coming around and it seems like things around you aren't going right. That's one thing that you can rely on.
Don't be ashamed to be a witness for the Lord.
MIT attracts many of the Westinghouse finalists here as undergraduates.
Chili dog with no teeth.
Helen Ghetto of Chicago will also attend MIT in the fall.
At MIT, I plan to major in biomedical engineering. If you have a clear conceptual image of what's going on in physical systems, you can better understand the human body.
Helen is here to discuss undergraduate research opportunities with Professor Margaret McVicker and Professor Robert Mann.
Hi, Helen.
Professor Robert Mann.
Well, I also hear you're interested in medicine,
Yes.
your career.
Yes.
Well, you're getting the right start, essentially. Good, solid engineering, undergraduate training, and then medical school. Let me give you an example of a kind of research investigation that you might become part of were you to join our group here in mechanical engineering. If we're interested in joints, here's the human femur. That's the hip joint, the femoral part of the hip joint, which fits into the natural acetabulum. And we'd like to understand how that natural joint performs as a superb bearing, better bearing than a man has ever made. But we also want to understand the joint because it does degenerate. Many people have arthritis. It's a very serious crippling disease. And you may recall that when the joint goes completely bad, it gets replaced or can be replaced by a wholly artificial joint, plastic on metal. And understanding the natural joint helps us to understand how to better improve these artificial joints. That has led to the development of some elaborate instrumentation, which makes it possible for us to measure all of the physical properties, including the geometry of the cartilage in the hip joint. And the research I want to introduce you to is how we're taking advantage of that large investment in equipment and knowledge, developed all by students, and we're now applying it to an understanding of the knee joint.
A former Westinghouse winner herself, Professor McVicker teaches physics here. She is also a graduate of MIT.
What was it like when you came here?
It was a kind of a shock to find there were only 26 women in the entering class out of 900 some odd freshmen. It is really noticeable now to look and see that 25% of the class are women.
I don't know, for me, I haven't encountered any type of discrimination or...
When I was at your stage of career, I didn't feel I had bumped into any either. But I must say, the further you go along, the higher the stakes are professionally, the more you become aware of those things. The difficulty comes in the intangible network between scientists with funders, what kind of situations where people do business and professional conversation, and are you present and can you be there? Have they even thought about that? I think things do get awkward later. And so I would say you have to be somewhat steeled for it. That doesn't mean that it's not worth it. It's worth it. But you have to be really pretty sure about that when you start down the road. It will get harder before it gets easier.
Back home in Chicago, Helen has been spending her senior year of high school taking 3 college courses.
I've been leading sort of a triple life. Definitely going to 3 universities and 1 high school is not the ideal situation. But in order to do what I want, I have to do that.
Helen did her Westinghouse project at Northwestern University. It was an investigation of how carbon monoxide binds to hemoglobin in human blood.
How's it going?
She needed to use flash photolysis equipment. So Professor Brian Hoffman agreed to let her work in his biochemistry laboratory.
You're going to have to change the wavelength, you think?
Well, if someone would come into a lab like this, there really isn't very much for them to see. And yet, at the time where you look around and see little apparently going on, it can be the most exciting time in a given project, because where the excitement occurs is really in your head. When you've got a problem that you're wrestling with and struggling with, and you begin that first moment when you begin to see some light through the shadows, through the haze, that can be catastrophically exciting, and certainly nothing that is visible outside of that person's head, whichever person it might be.
In science, nothing is dead end. You started out with 1 question and now you have 50, and from those 50 you can branch off into 50 more branches. You know, that's all science is, asking questions and trying to find out why things happen. I have a sister that's 8 years older than me, and I first got interested in science through Madeline. She went on to college when I was still in grammar school, and she had taken biology and chemistry and physics classes, and I don't know, she would do so many things that I thought were so exciting.
I was taking a comparative anatomy class, and of course Helen had to get into it, but we had the shark and the cat.
She brought everything home. Sharks, cats, lampreys, you name it, it was brought home.
Mud puppies.
The 2 sisters shared a room. When Madeline began pre-med courses, she found Helen could be of some assistance. with homework.
I was really desperate. I couldn't spell real well. I'd grab her out of bed.
So she'd wrap me up in a blanket, she'd sit me down right next to her, and she'd start typing away. Then I'd try to catch any mistakes that would come across on the paper. Right.
Still, there were times when it wasn't easy having such a curious little sister.
It tends to be a little difficult to be her sister at times because she is so much interested in science specifically. And she does tend to ask questions that you might not be secure enough in answering the exact way that is proper at the time. It's a little frustrating that way.
The reason why I did anything is really because of Madeline, I'm sure. Living with an older sister was great. I mean, it was the best thing for me. And I definitely would not be where I am today if it wasn't for Madeline. And for all the books she brought home, and for the cats and everything else.
I might not be here today where I am without you here.
I would be coming home at about 10 at night. And then I would have to study up for the next day. After going through the late nights with Madeline, I'm used to doing it. It's part of my system, you know. I'm the type of person that I have to be on the go all the time. I have to be constantly busy, and I love it. Some people say I'm a workaholic, but if that's what I am, fine. I'm happy. I've considered going into theater and into dance, but then that was early on. For me, dance is my biggest outlet. It's my only outlet. My idea of heaven would just be to spend a summer just dancing, doing nothing else but dancing, all different forms of dance, say from early morning to late at night.
The great majority of the Westinghouse winners live in or near cities, where they can use facilities at universities. In more rural parts of the country, learning science is a different story. Huntsville, Alabama, where Wernher von Braun developed the Redstone rocket, is NASA town. The space shuttle boosters were tested at the Marshall Space Flight Center, and NASA also has a rocket museum here. Many professional people in Huntsville are engineers, so when young people get interested in science, it's often through their parents' work. Huntsville is home to Gary Greiner, 17. This year, Alabama's only Westinghouse winner. Gary is also a champion pole vaulter.
Pole vaulting has always been important to me it's a very personal goal. It's something that I have to do myself, and there's nobody else I can really rely on. When it comes down to it, it's up to me. My father actually coaches us in the pole vault. He used to pole vault in high school and a little bit in college.
That's still 11. Okay, you too now, same thing.
Gary's father is an aeronautical engineer. He has encouraged Gary to compete in science fairs as well as in sports.
I enjoy competition, any kind of competition. I was in between science projects, and I was looking for a science project, and my dad was bringing me home books with different projects in them. Finally, I came across a picture of a seismograph, and I thought to myself, what do I know about seismology? And realized I knew absolutely nothing about it, and thought that would be a great place to start. Had nowhere to go but up. Can you hear me, Mom?
Loud and clear.
Yeah, I'm gonna move the boom some, try to reposition it. Turn the knob to check.
Which one is the check?
That's knob number 2.
I think I went too far. Oh, good.
Gary has been running his seismograph for 2 years. He wrote a research paper on his data for the Westinghouse competition.
Okay, it should be working now. This is probably the wavefront here, or microseisms of some sort. Those keep going for some time, getting large and then small again. Waves hitting a cliffs and a shore somewhere, waves from the ocean. What happened here?
Well, you told me to turn it, and I just turned a little too far.
I'd say so, just a little bit. This will be okay.
That's me. Can't take it off.
The fire marshal said they had a permit to do blasting here.
When we first installed it, we didn't really know what we would be picking up.
Wait, look, see that red
We
box?
went around to local sites where they were constructing houses and stuff.
This guy's probably going to chase us off. Let me talk. Hey.
How's it going?
My name's Gary Griner. This is my son, Gary.
My name's Jim Packard.
Jim?
Nice to meet you.
We just live down the road a ways here. I wondered if he could talk to you about a science project he's doing.
Sure.
I built a seismograph for a science project, and I was wondering if I was recording any local blasting. I was wondering, the past couple of days, have you done any?
Well, we were blasting yesterday and the day before that in the morning hours. We'll be doing some right up here later today, and then tomorrow we'll be doing quite a bit up there on the hill.
Would you mind if we stuck around and watched
No,
at the exact time?
no, you're more than welcome.
Over a period of 18 months, I recorded 1 nuclear test from Nevada and 53 earthquakes. The farthest one away I recorded was in the Indian Ocean, which was approximately 150 degrees away, and the closest one was one from Kentucky. What I have here is an earthquake I recorded in November of 1980, and this happened off the coast of Eureka, California, and was a 7.4 on the Richter scale. And what I do with data like this is I figure out the time between the arrivals of the first wave, which is the P wave, and the second wave, the secondary wave, the S wave. And I do that by measuring the distance between them. And since 1 inch equals 12 minutes, I can figure out the time. Here it was 6 minutes, and from that I can compute the average speeds of these waves.
Huntsville and surrounding Madison County rest on a maze of limestone caves where Gary and his father go exploring.
Those rocks aren't loose.
My father plays a really big role in my life all around. He's
Wow, look at this.
a tutor,
You got an option.
a mentor, a pal, and of course, we'll go hiking, spelunking together.
Drop over here. Look at that view. Isn't that great?
For this project, I had to rely on him to teach me some of the math because I just didn't get that in school.
That must be surface water, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. Coming in all this rain we've had.
Look at this.
Flows, some sort of flow deposits. He's always interested in learning, too. And so we learn together. Deposits fast. Shine your light
Up above it like
down
this.
from above it.
You took your flashlight?
Yeah. And so he really plays a big part in my life. Great.
Oh, that was nice.
Daylight again.
I'll pick it up.
Winning the Science Talent Search, being selected as a finalist, seemed to have changed a lot of people's view of me. I've always just been an average student. I still am. And now they kind of regard me as some sort of whiz kid or something. I don't think of myself as any special or any better than any of them.
No one can read the future for the Westinghouse winners. Will they be the ones to change science when they come of age? Will they understand how science can affect society, and that the joy of finding things out bears with it heavy responsibilities? It is clear that the nation's high schools are graduating fewer and fewer young people like them. At an early age, children are turning away from studying science.
It is true that for many young people and in many courses, the fun has gone out of science. Science should be fun. Science should be creative. Science should respond to the deepest urges for knowledge of young people and indeed everybody else. But it is also true that one of the problems with the hard sciences is that they are hard, and therefore to succeed does require hard work, devotion, ability, commitment.
One might ask if we shouldn't leave making scientific decisions to the experts. I would argue that we should not. I wonder if we really want a small, elite group of people in our nation making important decisions for us that affect our daily lives and affect our welfare, especially since all of us can understand the science which is necessary for most of those decisions.
We must have a balance of powers in which every citizen, in principle, is able to argue on the agenda of the nation, whether it is employment, whether it is productivity, pollution, resources, population pressures, and war. And particularly on the last one, without an educated citizenry, we turn ourselves over to the people whose job it is to persuade us of their own private ideas.
Our population today is less in touch with nature, less in touch with science than primitive people were 5,000 years ago, who at least looked up at the stars and could tell something about that. Many people haven't got the vaguest notion not only about high technology, but about such simple ideas as to why the Earth goes around the sun, why they stand on the ground and don't fly off, how photosynthesis works, why plants grow. To turn young people onto science, we have to, of course, do a number of things. We have to relate it to their daily lives, but we also have to show them that there is fun in science and creativity.
There's a little green bug in the road. He's crawling up the pedal. I can't see him.
Young people are born with curiosity about nature and how the world works. These children may one day grow up to be scientists in the future. At the least, they will need some science to understand the world they live in. The challenge is finding the way to give them the experiences and support they need to keep their excitement for science.
He's examining the flower.
Is he? The Westinghouse winners have had the best available in their science education. If we could give the same kind of support to the rest of the children in the schools, we could expect similar results with those children. But we don't seem to have the national will or the national priority to provide that kind of help.
Washington, D.C. The talent search winners converge here for the final judging sessions. There are visits with congressional representatives and capital area scientists. For a number of the students, some 15 or 16 years old, it's the first trip away from home on their own. On the evening of the awards banquet, the finalists await the scholarship announcements.
Fantastic. Hey, everybody, good luck, huh? Hey,
And now for the winner of the first place $12,000 Westinghouse Science Scholarship, and the bearer of the trophy symbolizing our advances in science, from New York City, Rena Beth Gordon.
material on this video cassette is protected by copyright. It is for private use only, and any other use, including copying, reproducing, or performance in public, in whole or in part, is prohibited by law.